Great, we're good to go if you guys want to get the presentation started.
I can start. My name is Bristol Lopez, and I am the district social worker at Cypress High School, and I service kids with the last name L through Z. And good evening, everybody.
Hi, everybody. I don't know what's exactly going on with my screen, but it's black. But my name is Daniel Larigo. I'm also a school social worker for Cypress High School, and I service students with the last name A through K.
And hello, everybody. I am the school social worker at Lexington Junior High School. I service all of the students. Okay, I guess we'll just jump in and get started. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. If not immediately, then definitely we'll cover questions at the end of the meeting. We'll try to we appreciate your time here. So we will do our best to end by 6 o'clock. Of course, if you want to stay a little after to ask questions, feel free to. But we're going to go ahead and get started. So today, we're going to be covering, sorry, Jonathan. We're going to be covering mental health. There we go. Awareness and what it means to foster resilience in our youth, both in the junior high and the high school. Next slide. And so if you just need a review of the core values, they're right on that screen. It very much aligns with all the work that we do as support staff on campus, both us as social workers, but also our counselors, our school psychs, and everybody else. If you want to review those, but it's all related to us really fostering resiliency in our students and getting past barriers and challenges that they face going through their educational career. Next slide. So today we're going to cover, this is just a few of the subjects, mental health versus mental illness, what the scope of the problem is, are any risk factors that potentially could come up, protective factors, short and long-term benefits, strategies that foster resilience, and what it looks like to seek help. Okay, so let's go over what mental health versus mental illness, what's the difference? So really mental health is kind of the embodiment of wellness, right? We're always doing our best to improve ourselves and our wellness, both mentally and physically. So that means we're always trying to be more active, eating healthy, but that also means, challenging challenging ourselves with, puzzles, intrigue, doing things that we're passionate about, all things that move the needle towards mental health and wellness. As opposed to mental illness, which is sorry, it's been a long day. It means having a mental illness, which is something that's not working, that's impacting your functioning in life. So that means when we're looking at our students, they're having trouble getting up in the morning to attend school, or they're not attending school at all. Or maybe they've been doing well academically and all of a sudden they're getting failing grades, or they're not socializing well with their peers. They're feeling left out or isolated, or a lack of self-esteem. And that's all impacting how they're doing in school, but also how they're doing at home, whether they're doing the chores or if they're sleeping all day. So if you see severe impact in kind of how they're behaving and how they're completing the tasks that they would typically have to do as a teenager, that's when we should consider exploring whether there's an appearance of a mental illness. And again, the difference between mental illness and mental health is we all have, actually go to the next slide. It'll explain further. There's a continuum, right? So it's not necessarily whether we're black and white, mentally ill, or a mental disorder, and we're mentally well. It's kind of a spectrum. So starting with the most, again, we always strive to be the best or the most mentally well that we could be. We're going to have normal ups and downs, which means we're going to hit challenges, like we're going to have a disagreement with a friend, or we're going to get a project that's really hard to surpass, or we're going to lose a championship in a soccer game, and that's going to really bring us down. Maybe physical illness can also affect our mental wellness, right? If we're not keeping ourselves healthy, that could affect our mental wellness. The way we're performing, like I mentioned before, and being socially and physically active. And then it moves more towards struggling with your mental health. If you're nervous, irritable, you're feeling sad or overwhelmed, now it's affecting how you're sleeping or your energy levels, or now you're isolating yourselves. You're not really being as active or socializing as much as you used to. And then decreasing in mental wellness, you're experiencing a lot of anxiety. You're feeling sad most days of the week. You're feeling hopeless. Your performance has now decreased and you can't focus in class or doing your work. You're not doing your homework assignments, having a negative attitude. So again, with that irritability, maybe more likely to snap or have a negative attitude towards their siblings, and completely avoiding social situations. So just staying at home when they have opportunities to hang out with their friends or to go to family functions. And then seeing a severe mental illness would be easily angered, always in a poor mood, having thoughts of suicide, being exhausted, being physically ill, because our mental health does affect our bodies. Sometimes that means the appearance of a rash or digestive issues, or debilitating migraines, or just exhaustion, an inability to perform tasks, and chronic absenteeism. So they're now avoiding school completely, not attending school no matter what you do, right? Even if you force them to come to school, isolating themselves and avoiding social events. So they don't want to interact with anybody. That would be the maximum of impairment if we're looking at mental illness. Okay, next slide. So what we're seeing now, like this is the most recent data, is that mental wellness, although it's definitely at the forefront, people are talking about it, it's definitely still affecting our children, especially after the pandemic. We see that 1 in 6 youth will develop a mental disorder each year. It doesn't mean that they're they continue with that mental disorder. Maybe it is resolved, but 1 in 6 youth will develop a mental health disorder each year. And that's under Mental Health of America. We also see that 50% of youth with a mental disorder do not receive treatment. And that's most of the time it's because parents aren't aware that they're struggling, or it might be that there's barriers, right? Health insurance can be really difficult to work with, or maybe it's just not a viable option. Maybe the finances aren't there to support the student with their mental health. So there's a lot of barriers, which is why the percentage is so high. And suicide is the second leading cause of death among 10 to 34-year-olds, which is, I believe the first is accidental death, right, through accidents. That's still incredibly high. And lastly, 52% of there's been a 52% increase in combined hospitalization rates and serious mental illness and substance abuse conditions in children, and that's from the 25th annual report on the conditions of children in Orange County. So that's obviously very relevant to us because we all live in Orange County. So that's an incredibly high increase within the most recent span. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate everybody so that we can really support our students so that they don't have to go through this alone and they can, feel mentally better. Next slide. So risk factors, and again, risk factors mean that you're more at risk to develop a mental illness, but just because you have a lot of risk factors does not mean that you're going to develop one. It just means that you probably have a lot of challenges that you're facing that can make living life and being productive members of society harder. Those can be school and peers. So that's bullying, that's having not the skills to manage social situations. And we're seeing that a lot with our students that miss 2 years of, learning to be social with their peers. They lost 2 years of that if they weren't out in the community and they were stuck at home because of the pandemic. Risk factors with family, that means maybe the death of a loved one, or split families can be hard for students to get through. Individually, that can mean maybe they have more of an affinity to be pessimistic, or maybe they have a not health impairment, they have asthma or some other like diabetes. Those are all factors that could impair. It's just like a challenge that they have to get through, which mean they might be more likely to develop a mental illness because that's a challenge that would be hard to face for an adolescent or youth. Right. Next slide. Okay. And what does poor mental health look like for our teens? Cognitively, it means we see they're more negative. They have more negative thoughts. They're having difficulty focusing and concentrating, and they're not feeling motivated. So they're not motivated to do their homework on their own, or start their projects early, or do their chores. Emotionally, they look more sad, they lower energy. They worry a lot, or they're overwhelmed, or they're feeling hopeless, or worthless. Physically, they're having trouble sleeping. Maybe they're not eating as much, or they're eating too much. They're binging on junk food. Sometimes we see they feel physically ill, headaches, stomach aches, backaches, digestive issues, and feelings of panic. And behaviorally, they're avoiding school, avoiding their friends, spending all their time alone in their room, being argumentative, being aggressive, both verbally, it could be physically, and again, just the lack of motivation. So they're sluggish. They don't have the energy to do things that they used to enjoy. Next slide. Okay, so let's think about this for a
Rebecca?
moment. Yeah.
I can jump in here.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I just wanted to take a moment. Good job, Rebecca, by the way. I wanted just to take a moment and ask this question to the parents out there. What thoughts or emotions would surface for you as a parent if your child's mental health was suffering? So I want you to kind of think about that for a few seconds. And then if you would, please write in the chat box your thoughts. So we give you about a minute to do this, and then we'll look through the answers in the chat box. So again, we're just reading this question here, and then we will be answering in the chat box, and then we'll be going over those answers after we're done. So for the sake of time, we're going to move on, but thank you so much for your answers. Some of them were like, how should I handle this? I'm not sure how to handle this. And this exercise was to allow parents to know that we all have the same kind of questions, right? We don't know all the answers. And so it's always good to know that you're not alone in this. And so I'm hoping that this exercise kind of gave you that feeling. Next slide, please. Okay, protective factors. So these are a list of protective factors. Protective factors are basically factors in a child's life that could help prevent, in some circumstances, not in all circumstances, but can help prevent poor mental health. And so some that I wanted to highlight is having a safe space. It's important to be able to provide a space where students feel safe and secure to process their thoughts and their feelings without judgment. So I think the last part of that was the most important, which is without judgment. A lot of times students are hesitant to reach out to adults especially, and sometimes their parents, because they're afraid of being judged for their thoughts. Next, I wanted to highlight the safe and secure relationship with caregivers. So safe and secure relationships with caregivers starts and ends with trust. If a child can trust you with their thoughts and their feelings without fear of embarrassment or even guilt, children are more likely to disclose their true feelings to you. So we may not always like maybe the thoughts that our child is having, but it's important to be there for them and not make them feel like what they're going through is less than, or not make them feel bad about what they're thinking or what they're going through. Next, I wanted to highlight participation in therapy. So although we as parents might be providing our children with a safe space and a secure relationship, sometimes students and children and youth don't feel like disclosing a lot of personal, information to parents due to fear of embarrassment or fear that they're making their parents feel bad. And so just having another outlet for students to participate maybe in therapy would be a good tool to combat poor mental illness. We can go to the next. So, so short-term and long-term benefits of having protective factors. What we see is higher academic performance. So we feel like if students can address their emotional needs and find their why and find their self-esteem, their self-worth, they tend to do better in their academics because they have something that they're striving for, right? They put value on themselves, so they put value on the work that they do. Future employment, that's a huge indication as well of future employment. It builds resilience, like Rebecca was saying earlier. And then what we see is a decrease in risk of suicide or self-harm. We see a decrease in the risk of substance abuse, a decrease in the risk of behavioral problems and academic failure. Next slide, please. So this is pretty important, and I think this really resonated with me when I read this. So teens report that their parents have the greatest influence over their risk behavior decisions, and that's over friends, siblings, social media. And so it's important to note that parents hold the power for their youth's success and their mental health. And I know that, most parents don't take that lightly, but sometimes we do forget. We tend to forget that. But this is just a good reminder. Next slide, please. So teaching your youth how to navigate problems. So it's important to teach youth how to identify their emotions and how to express them. It could be utilizing an emotional wheel or emotion wheel. It's a simple Google search. What it is, it's shaped like a wheel, but it has a list of names of emotions that can give a name to what the student is feeling or the child is feeling. So a lot of times maybe they say, you know, I don't know how I'm feeling. But if we put a chart in front of them and ask them to kind of review it, it's easier for them to kind of identify their emotions and their feelings. It's also important to discuss appropriate ways to express emotions, right? So if you're angry, how does that look? Maybe not yelling at somebody, right? Maybe asking for a break, asking for a few minutes, hey, give me some time to cool off. I'm really angry right now. That might be an appropriate way to express some emotion, right? Opening up the conversation to help identify triggers and to avoid adverse behavior. So by doing this, it'll open up that conversation. It'll help identify those triggers and then hopefully to avoid those adverse behaviors. So the next is people react differently to the same situation, right? So it's important to know or to teach your child that we all have strengths and weaknesses. And depending on our strengths and our weaknesses, we might react to things a little different than other people. That doesn't make us bad people, but it's important to kind of let them know that. And then it's also important as parents not to compare between siblings, and that we should be giving individual care to each of our kids. Sometimes it's easy to be like, hey, your brother's doing his homework, why aren't you, right? Things like that, but that can prove to have like an effect on poor or on mental health. Next is to teach them time management and encourage a balance between their schoolwork and their social life. So encouraging setting schedules or routines between school and social life. It shouldn't be an all or nothing kind of thing. It's been proving that social life is very important as well as academic performance. And so if we can have a balance between the two by setting schedules or routines, it's proven to be better for mental health. Teach them to focus on small goals and not bigger goals, right? So basically, it's harder for students to see the bigger picture goals because they feel like it's unattainable because maybe it's too far out. Maybe it's 4 years and then I graduate. So why do I have to work now? Why do I have to do homework now? It's not until 4 years, right? So by implementing like maybe smaller goals that are working towards those bigger goals, it helps the student conceptualize the bigger picture goals. Next slide, please. And then when you're faced with a problem, it's important to ask questions and open-ended questions. Especially at this age, what we tend to see is students maybe, or parents asking, how was your day at school? Students answering good. And then that's the end of the conversation, right? So we want to open it up to open-ended questions. A good one is, how does it feel, right? So maybe you're asking a question about not attaining a grade that the child wanted, right? So how does that make you feel? Or what makes this feeling worse if they're going through a feeling of being overwhelmed? So what is making this feeling worse, or what would make the feeling worse? Is there anything that we as parents can do to make it worse, or that we make it worse? And if so, what is that? So these are all important questions that I would honestly take a picture of this if you can right now, because when we're in a situation, we tend to kind of forget these open-ended questions. So it might be a good refresher to have a picture on hand. But this just opens up the conversation and it allows the student to describe how they're feeling and what they're going through, which in some cases they don't get that opportunity to do so, because they're able to take the easy way out and just say good and not answer the question. So yeah, asking open-ended questions is huge for promoting mental health. Next slide, please. And this is where I'll let Bristol take over.
Thanks, Daniel. All right, so rolling right along, you've asked them those open-ended questions, and now maybe you're getting some very honest answers. So your next question is probably, how do I respond to what they say? Which is an extremely valid question. So number one, listen to understand with no interpretations or judgments. I think that one of the things I hear most often when I've asked if my students have shared this with their parents is, no, they're going to be mad, or no, they're going to judge me, which is very rarely the case. That is just the feeling and the fear that they have. So sometimes a lot of those fears will keep them from responding or keep them from being honest. So if you can truly listen to understand and be very open to what they say without any judgment, that can go a long way. And number two, acknowledge their feelings. So it's very easy to want to step in and say, no, you're totally normal, or no, like everything is fine. Like you have this great family, and no, like we're going to get through this. It's going to be okay. And that may well be true, but I always just say, let's backtrack a little bit and let's stop there in the feeling for just a second to acknowledge what they're actually feeling and validate that. And number three, compliment their efforts in trying to solve the problem. So praising them for coming to you with this problem and coming to you to get help is something that we want to encourage. So the more you praise it, ideally, the more they will come to you with those problems to help you or to have you help them. And number four, reassure them you are there to support. So I think that goes without explaining, but making sure that they know that and making sure that it's obvious. So you may know that, and that may be something that you're like, of course I would do anything for my child. And sometimes, believe it or not, they may not believe it until they actually hear that from you. And then number five, ask if they want your advice or if they want you to get involved. So kids are in this stage, especially in high school, right? They're in this stage where they want to do it on their own and they're experimenting with that independence. So just asking them, how would you like me to support? Do you want my opinion? Do you want what I would tell you to do? Or can I just step in right here? And maybe giving them the option to choose one of those can go a long way. All right, next slide. We're going to go ahead and watch this short video, and then I'll talk about it afterwards.
Having resilience is so important to all of us, especially parents. That's because as parents, we play such a big role in helping our children and families build the skills of resilience. One thing we can be sure of, all of us are going to face a future filled with challenges and adversity. I mean, if you really think about it, our road ahead is going to bring us face to face with hard times, such as moments of failure, challenges with our health. You might have the experience of losing a job or your employment, or go through a difficult relationship crisis. And eventually all of us will experience the death of a loved one. So you may be wondering, what does resilience have to do with all of this? To put it into simple terms, resilience is the ability to bounce back when you have every reason to shut down, but you fight on. Well, for many of us, sometimes life challenges get the best of us and we shut down. But people who are resilient have an ability not only to cope with life challenges, but to thrive in the face of adversity. So what is it about those people that makes them resilient? Were they just born that way? To be honest, we all have personality traits that enable us to be more resilient at times. But all the latest research is clear. A person's ability to be resilient isn't fixed. It can change. So that's the purpose of this guide, to show you as parents how to be more resilient in your own life, and then show you practical things you can do to foster resilience in your family.
Thank you. Next slide.
Having
All right. So, shifting a little bit into the area of resilience. So, we went over how do we recognize a mental illness? How can we talk about it? What should we ask? How do we respond? And now it's coming to, okay, but what do we do to truly get through this? And how can I, as a parent, foster that resilience in my child? So as the video described, this is something that can be developed. So you'll see on the slide here, it says developmental relationships, and those are relationships that promote the youth in becoming their best selves. And parent-child relationships are probably the most important developmental relationship that they will ever have. And like Daniel mentioned earlier, they get the most influence from their parents and from their home. So there are 5 key elements that help kids grow, learn, and thrive. And this is what I'll go over here. So number 1, express care. And again, this may seem like, I do this all the time. I literally wiped their butts growing up, right? Now you're thinking, I express care every day by showing up for them and taking them to school. And you are doing that. And sometimes, kids don't realize all that goes into just the day-to-day, right? Of just putting food on the table and keeping their clothes clean. Sometimes they do need to hear a little bit more than that. So you are showing them you care by doing all of those things that are absolutely essential to keeping our kids alive and well. And the thing that goes one step beyond is really showing them and expressing to them, like, you matter to me. You as a person and a tiny human matter to me. And each child is going to have a different way that we need to show them that. Maybe it comes down to what their love language is. Some kids prefer words of affirmation. Some kids like gifts. Some kids like coming alongside and helping them with things. But being intentional about showing them that you truly matter to me and I truly do love you, really fosters that level of connection and the ability to move through hard times. So number 2, challenge growth. So push them to keep getting better. I like how these are worded because it's almost like your child is talking to you. And I think that because these may be things that they really do need, but they would never express to you that they want. So push me to keep getting better. Yeah, of course, that sounds challenging, but that is your role as the parent in the home to really push them so that when they get out of the home, they know what this is like and they know, okay, I've been through tough stuff and my parent was there to support me and I learned how to get through it and I can do this again. Number 3, provide support. So help me complete tasks and achieve goals. Now, this can be hard because, again, you're doing all of those other things to keep them alive and well, which takes up a lot of time. So the idea of helping them and coming alongside them to complete some of those tasks may sound daunting, but again, this is going to be unique to your child. Some kids need that one-on-one attention for homework. Some of them just need you to say, hey, what'd you go over today? Some of them need you to help them sit down and plan out what's my life gonna look like after high school? And what are my goals? And how do I even get there? What are those baby steps that I need to take today to meet those goals? That's going to be unique to your child, but I do see it as like a coming alongside rather than doing it for them. It's being there next to them saying, I'm here to support you. And when you need it, I'll be here. Maybe they don't need it all the time, but if they do, you'll be there. And 4, share power. So reciprocal respect goes such a long way. I know I keep saying that all of this goes a very long way. But showing them that you do value their opinion and that they can have a say in the matter. You know, there's times where they're not going to have a say in the matter, and you do have to put your foot down, and you are the parent in those moments. But there's times when maybe there can be shared power, and you can say, you know what would you do? Okay, how can we move forward from this? What does this look like to you? What if the roles were reversed? What would you tell your kid? And sometimes I'll pose that question to my students, just to kind of help them get outside of themselves. But when they see that you are respecting them, not as an equal per se, because you are the parent, but when you're respecting them as a person, as somebody who has value and has intelligence and wants good things for their life, they really do feel that. And number 5, expand possibilities. So connect me to people and places that broaden my world. Now, again, this is going to look different for everybody. And I've heard some parents will take their kids traveling and they're experiencing different things. Maybe some kids are doing service or community service out in their community. But I know a lot of our kids like to just stay in their own little bubble, and that's comfortable. And when they get outside of that and they're able to experience something different, it helps them kind of shift their perspective, and like it says, expand their possibilities. And these are all things that can help foster resilience and that ability to just get through tough stuff, because tough stuff is inevitable. Next slide. Now, I do believe you will be getting a copy of these slides, and this is a screenshot of that website where that video came from. And so this is a resource guide for parents. So if you feel like, okay, this information was great, but where can I get it? Where can I access it? Where are other tools and ideas? You can go here. And then when you have the slides, this is actually a direct link. Next slide. All right, so say you as a family have determined that your child does need therapy, or you would like to connect them with a mental health professional. Here are some tips for working with mental health professionals. So you know that when we're talking about mental health professionals, there are a lot of different people with a lot of different credentials out there. So you may see LCSW, licensed clinical social worker, LMFT, licensed marriage and family therapist, PsyD, psychologist, psychiatrist. All of those individuals would be considered a mental health professional. Basically, all of them except for the psychiatrist are the ones that are doing therapy. So any of those credentials would work. Oh, even LPCC, licensed professional counselor. All of those people are equipped to provide a direct service and treat your child's mental illness. Now, the psychiatrist, those are the ones that are prescribing medication. Ideally, they're all working together. So when you are working with them, number 1, remember that you are the expert in your child. Now, you may not fully understand what's going on or how to help them, but you are the expert in the child. You have the right to ask questions. You have the right to say what you've noticed, the shifts you've seen. You can say, this is how they were as a child, and this is how they are now. This is their patterns of behavior. Again, you are the expert. They may be the expert in mental health. You're the expert in your child. 2, develop a list of symptoms, concerns, and questions. I'll even tell my students this when they're going into therapy. I say, write it all down, because it's really hard to remember at that time, especially if you're feeling really stressed. So document everything, write down your concerns, write down those symptoms that you've been noticing, the shifts in behavior, write down your questions and make sure you get them answered. If you are not getting clear communication from your mental health professional, that could be a sign that it's not the right one for you. 3, mental health professionals should be able to help you understand the symptoms that you're describing or that your child is exhibiting. 2, they should identify goals of treatment. And 3, they should provide strategies on how to manage the symptoms at home. So usually when you're going into a therapy appointment, that therapist, and they're all slightly different, but that therapist will start out with an assessment or an intake, and they will get all of the information that they need to get the full picture of the client sitting in front of them. And they should interview the parent as well to get information from the parent, because like we said, you're the expert on them. After they get that information, they should identify goals. So they need to know, like, what are we working on here, and how are we going to do that, and how are we going to measure that? And then they should be making sure that the client, the youth, and you are aware of those goals, so that while we're working on them in session, parents can be working on them at the home, and then we're checking in on those regularly. And again, they should be giving you lots of strategies. It does happen, unfortunately, but it is rare for a child to go into therapy and then to leave, and then it's just like that's their own private time and we have no idea what's going on. Now, they do have a right to confidentiality. So the therapist does legally have to maintain the child's confidentiality in that session, but that does not mean that they can't give you recommendations or strategies or things that seem to work for them. And if the child gives the therapist permission to share, then they can share a little bit more detail with you. But again, that's only if the child gives them permission to share. So last thing I want to say about this that isn't on the slide, and this is something that I tell my students as well. When you are going into therapy, I just want to normalize the fact that it is really difficult, and therapy is not necessarily fun. It can be very uncomfortable, and for a lot of kids especially, it can be really scary because they are talking to a complete stranger about some things that are very deep and personal. So I always want to validate the fact that therapy is a big step. It's a very brave step, and I applaud anybody who makes that choice to go to therapy, but it is uncomfortable. So I always warn my students that I want you to know that it will be uncomfortable. That is a normal feeling, but it should never cross a boundary. It should never be something that you're really not okay with. Like, for example, maybe they push you too far to share too much information faster than you're ready to, or maybe, it's a male with a young female, and that's not something that they're comfortable with. And that's just, he may be great, but that's just not something that we're comfortable with. Those are things that are okay to say no to, and we seek out a new therapist. But we never want to say, oh, I don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable. That's expected. And so when you as a parent are able to come in and say, you know what, this is really hard. This is rough, but I'm here with you and I am coming along for the ride. It's also helpful for students if parents agree to maybe go to a few sessions on their own. So students can see, or children can see, oh, I'm not the only one doing this. My mom is going too, or my mom and dad are going to see a therapist. I'm not the only one. They're doing it with me. That goes a really long way also. Next slide. So where can you go for help? So the main line that we refer parents to is called OC Links. So this is basically a linkage center. So you can call in for any type of resource that you're looking for, especially therapy resources, to this number, and they will give you 3 agencies or places to call that can help connect you. Now, if those places don't work out, you can just call back. And there's also a website for them. And then there is a 24/7 crisis support line, and that is listed here as well. You can call, text, or chat anytime. The other crisis line that is fairly new is 988. So instead of 911 for medical emergencies, 988 is the crisis hotline or suicide hotline that's national. And anybody can call into that as well anytime. Okay, next slide, or is that the last one? Okay, awesome. Well, thank you all so much for showing up and listening to us. It looks like we ended a little bit early, but I wanted to leave some time for questions. So if anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat and we will do our best to answer them. And again, we are here for you. So like it says here, remember, you're not doing this alone. There's other parents here that are wondering the same things as you, and we are all, as social workers and school staff, admin and counselors, we're all here to support as best we can.